Hello folks, I played on Wednesday night at the Wachusett Chess Club in the third round of the Gail Lingner Memorial with the white pieces against Arthur Barlas, rated 1740. I led with d4, he played knight f6, I played c4, he played e6, and after knight c3, bishop to b4, we have the Nimzo Indian defense. And by email, after the game, Arthur shared his thoughts with me about it, and mentioned that he likes the Nimzo Indian because it gives black good counter chances, as was made obvious in the middle game, in this game. I played queen c2, he played d5, and I made the first, probably inaccurate move with e3, though of course it's really solid and white's not worse here. But much more common in the database I looked at is c takes d5 or a3. I played e3, as I said, and Arthur played b6. And I spent quite a bit of time here, first of all looking for a move, and second, trying to figure out why queen a4 check wouldn't just be winning on the spot, picking off this bishop on b4. And what I found is after queen a4 check, black can try knight c6, giving up the knight instead, but then playing bishop to d7. And the white queen is awful short on squares. She has to go to b7. So I calculated that for a while and couldn't quite figure out how to make things work out in my favor and keep the extra piece. Now, let me show you what I was worried about. After queen takes c6, bishop to d7, queen b7, I was looking at two ideas for black. One is to play a5, looking for knight e4 and knight d6, trapping the white queen. And the other was to play knight e4 immediately, putting a lot of pressure on c3. So now if I use my queen's one escape square on a6, probably getting her to safety, black can play knight takes c3, b takes c3, bishop takes c3 check, and grab the rook on a1. So this was not appealing to me. I only realized in the days following the game that after queen b7 and knight e4, I could probably play queen a6, because after knight takes c3, instead of taking the knight, I can play bishop d2. The knight can't move away anywhere good, and can't move away with check, and can't move away in a way that threatens the white queen, so it looks like black's going to give up another piece here. And I think had he tried a5, I could have played bishop d3, denying the black kingside knight the e4 square. So probably a big mistake on my part not taking on c6, and Arthur confirms that in his email, pointing out that I believe he looked at the position with a computer, and the computer said queen takes c6 is excellent for white. I played bishop d2 instead. Arthur played bishop to d7, and I retreated my queen to c2. And at first it looks like this is a total waste of a move for white. Queen a4 and queen back to c2 developed the queen to c2 in two moves instead of one, while black got to play knight c6 and bishop d7. But I was thinking during the game that it's not a total loss, because having the black knight on c6 makes it harder for black to play c5, which is a big source of counterplay which can lead to equalization. So I thought the knight on c6 may not actually be a good piece for black. It may have to move again, in which case it's not such a big deal that I helped it go there. Arthur castled kingside, I played knight f3, and he took on c3. And here's maybe another inaccuracy for me. I took back with my bishop, but had a trouble for much of the rest of the game doing anything with this bishop. It turned out to be a really bad piece. So I think I should have taken back with the b-pawn. And then play might have continued knight a5, targeting the pawn on c4. I might have traded on d5 and played c4, threatening to take on a5, which I think would have forced black to play knight takes c4. Then after bishop takes, d takes, queen takes c4. I'm not sure that white is better, but this is better than what happened in the game, and this bishop on d2, though currently blocked by the white central pawn structure, has potential. Instead I took back with the bishop. Arthur played knight e4, and I played c takes d5. He played e takes d5, and I put my bishop on d3. And here again maybe is a mistake, because c takes d5 frees the bishop on d7 at a time when it's not clear what white's getting from that. I probably should just have played bishop to d3, and if black wants to trade on c4, I can take back with my bishop there, which costs another move, but it allows me to end up with 2 central pawns to his 1. Which I get anyway, I'm sorry, but I should say, but it doesn't free the bishop on d7. Okay, I traded on d5 and played bishop to d3, and Arthur surprised me here. Actually, I'm going to stop here and point something out. I was hoping to use the c-file to put a bunch of pressure on the knight and eventually force it to move and then win the pawn on c7. That never really happened. Arthur played f5 here, a really aggressive move that I thought was bad during the game, to be honest, because it moves us into a pawn structure that looks like it came from a Stonewall Dutch. Except that black is missing his dark squared bishop in exchange for a white knight. I thought on principle and on opening theory knowledge, this should be good for white. But Arthur played really well, and maybe I was just wrong. I castled kingside, he played queen e7, and to give you an idea of why I was having problems here, notice that if I ever take the knight on e4, black will take back with a pawn, and then we'll have a secured pawn on the e4 square, which will help him attack my king. It will, if this knight is still here, kick it off of the f3 square, making it hard to defend h2. I played rook a to c1, looking to get my queenside play going before Arthur could do anything on the king side, but was very aware of the fact that f4 was coming and bishop g4, and that might cause some serious damage. He played rook a to c8, I played a3. Trying to think here, I believe somewhere in here, let's just say after queen e7, I was strongly considering playing b4, even though it wasn't in appearance reasonable. Because I thought if knight takes b4, then I'd play bishop takes b4, queen takes b4, and queen takes c7 with tempo hitting the bishop on d7 and kind of getting into black's position before he gets into mine. But black could have played knight takes c3 here instead, and then after queen takes c3, taken on b4 with the queen, in which case black's probably just up a pawn. So I played rook a to c1 instead, he played rook a to c8, and I played a3 trying to support the move b4. But after black's a5, take a look at this bishop on c3. It can't use any of these squares because they're all occupied by white pawns. And it can't use any of these squares because they're all occupied or guarded by black pawns. So it's a really bad piece, and it was important for me here to find some way to activate it, even if it meant the cost of a pawn or something. I think I can go ahead and say that based on how the game played out. Maybe I should have played knight d2 and tried to play f3. Perhaps it would have been necessary to play rook e1 first to guard e3 against the queen, and then the knight can come back to f1 to guard h2 and e3. I might have enjoyed playing that position. But I instead played bishop up to b5, trying to threaten black enough times on c6 that he'd have to move the knight away, at which point I'd be targeting the pawn on c7. The problem with this is that this awful bishop on c3 is not just, it's not useless, it's worse than useless because it's blocking my heavy pieces on the c-file. Arthur played rook f6, starting a kingside attack, very scary, as you'll see in a moment. Queen a4, putting more pressure on this knight on c6. Arthur played rook h6, and without an idea of how I was going to get counterplay, I went ahead with b4, looking to break down the black queenside pawn structure. Really worried about an attack on the king side, but thinking maybe I can get Arthur to pay attention to what I want him to pay attention to, and I could break through on the queen side. To his credit, though, he played queen e8, heading for the h5 square, continuing with his kingside attack. I played b takes a5, saying, Arthur, no, pay attention over here, don't look at the nearly naked white king. But he played queen h5. And now it looks like he's going to go f4, he's going to go bishop g4, bishop takes f3, and white's going to be dead. I played rook fe1 to give my king an escape square, so that in the variation I just talked about, I might be able to go king f1 after queen takes h2 check instead of just having to shake hands. Arthur played rook to g6. I thought he was going to play f4 here, again with the idea to put the bishop on g4 and grab this knight on f3. He went rook g6 instead, which threatens the knight on f3 because the g-pawn is now pinned. And I didn't give it much credit at first, but the way he followed up was very impressive. I played queen to d1. He played f4, the idea I mentioned a moment ago. I played bishop takes c6 as a maybe last-ditch attempt to get Arthur to pay attention to the queen side instead of the king side. But it did not work. I expected the move bishop to g4 here. Although, actually, maybe that's no good. Bishop takes d... Oh, no, there's queen takes d5. Okay. So I thought bishop g4 here, and black, of course, just wants to grab this piece on f3. Once he does that, which he's doing without giving a piece back, by the way, because if queen takes f3, there's just queen takes f3 and the g-pawn's still pinned. There will be an attack on the h-file, or wherever black wants one. But he played rook takes g2 instead. Rook takes g2 check. Very dangerous move. If I had taken the rook, which I didn't, then I think black wins almost immediately with bishop h3 check. For example, king g1, queen g4 check, king h1, knight takes f2 checkmate. And the alternative is, let's see, after bishop h3 check, king h1, perhaps there's just, yeah, knight takes f2 check, king g1, now queen g4 check, king takes f2, and queen g2 checkmate. So I played king h1 instead, and expected here that Arthur would play rook takes h2 check. After knight takes h2, knight takes f2 check, and he would grab the queen on d1, and my knight would be badly positioned on h2. He went for, though, a worse version of that. He played knight takes f2 check here immediately. Oh, by the way, he said to me in his email that it looks like the move bishop g4 is just winning for black. In fact, it's mating within, oh, I don't know, I think he said 8 moves. And you can kind of see why black wants to just take on f3, after which there's going to be queen takes h2 checkmate. So white's probably having to give up the queen here somehow, and gets mated in the computer line anyway. Arthur played knight takes f2 check, though, which forces king takes g2. But the difference between this and that variation I showed you before is that now after bishop h3 check, king takes f2, black did not get in queen g4 with check, and so now does not immediately have queen g2 checkmate. He took on d1. I took on d7. I think taking back on d1 is not a good idea because these two black pieces are very powerful against the white king. It's much better to take on d7 and threaten to grab the rook on c8 and cover a checking square on g4. Arthur played queen g6 check, and after king f1 invaded with the queen, queen d3 check. I blocked with rook e2 because the alternative was to head back to the g-file and allow queen g6 check. And he took on c3. And he pointed out in his email that maybe here it was better to play rook f8 and keep attacking the white king. Because after knight takes c3, I have the opportunity to go rook takes c3, queen takes c3, bishop takes c8. And now it's starting to... the tables are kind of turning. White has a rook and 2 minors for the queen. And if those... well, how do I say this? If they were all minor pieces and they were anchored and coordinated, they would outperform a queen. So the fact that one of them is a rook instead of a minor piece means that's even more likely to be the case. Queen takes a3, a takes b6, c takes b6, and there's some cleaning up of pawns here. Bishop e6 check, king f8, and bishop takes d5. Arthur played f takes e3. And so now it's kind of a race. Black would like to go b5, b4, b3, b2, b1 queen. And white would like to coordinate his pieces against the black king, maybe pick off this pawn on e3. And whichever happens first is probably going to be something that happens as a game-winning maneuver. I played bishop to e4, maybe thinking about taking on h7, but really just trying to make sure that my pieces are protected from forks and skewers and pins that can be put into place by the black queen. He played b5, I played rook to c2. I want to invade with my rook and start causing problems. If I just sit around, then this b pawn is going to go all the way up the board. He played g6, giving his king another escape square. I played king to e2. Arthur played b4. And things were looking pretty scary here, but I could kind of tell that with all these white pieces I should have some kind of play against the black king. I went rook c8 check, king g7, rook c7 check, and Arthur came up to h6 and mentioned to me in his notes after the game that maybe it would have been a better idea to stay back with the black king. I played knight e5, again securing one of my pieces on a nice square, and now I can play knight to g4 check and knight takes e3, getting rid of that pawn. Maybe I can get some kind of attack against the king going. Arthur played b3, which is exactly what he should be doing. I mean, okay, maybe that's not the best move, but he should definitely be trying to queen that pawn. That's how he's going to win this game. I played knight to g4 check. Oh, by the way, if black plays queen a2 check here, and after king takes e3, takes on h2, there's knight g4 check, winning the queen. After b3, knight g4 check, king g5, knight takes e3, it looks like that's not the case anymore. Black can play queen a2 check and queen takes h2. And that's in fact what he did. And in the lead up to this, I was thinking to myself that after queen takes h2, I was just going to play rook c5 check because black goes back to f6 or h6, and then I have knight g4 check and I win the queen, and my rook has time to stop the b pawn. Although the bishop's stopping it anyway. But that's what I was thinking during the game. We got to this position because black took on h2 and I played rook c5 check immediately. And only then did I realize that black can move to h4. But luckily, in the time that we spent looking at this position, I was able to figure out that white is winning in that variation as well. If you'd like to figure out why, go ahead and stop the video and see what you can find. Arthur played king h4. I played knight g2 check. Of course, if black gives up the queen, this is winning for white. So Arthur has to play king h3. And now there is perpetual with knight f4 check, king h4, knight g2 check. But better is rook to h5 check, giving up the rook. Only legal move is g takes h5, and now bishop f5 checkmate. So this was kind of a nice checkmate to deliver, though I can't claim to have seen it before playing rook c5 check. This puts me at 2 out of 3 in that tournament. There are 2 more rounds, and it looks like I'm going to play Ken Gurge next week. Thank you for watching.